Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies. Hello. I don't know the drunk. You with the drunk. You drunk. Yo, you go home. You go sleep it off. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know why I was slurring in the beginning then. I've been doing a lot of online work, like laptop-y type stuff. And I think the brain to tongue connection wasn't quite firing there. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We'll do that. I'm going to do the whole thing like that. So, we're going to keep this brief. He says, it's come up a few times in the face-to-face coaching. It came up, and then I mentioned it in a video recently about disassociation being an emotional flashback, and people are like, "Wow, didn't even think that was a thing." And I'm like, "Okay, I just assumed." And when you assume, you make an arse out of you and me. I assumed that people knew that. It's a classic freezing response to dissociate. That is a flashback. It can be a way of coping with emotional flashbacks, but it can actually be a flashback in and of itself. So the wonderful thing about accepting that as a model for what's going on with dissociation is, the way we construct the problem is the way we can find a solution to the problem. It's very, very straightforward. So if we go, oh, I'm dissociating, that must be an emotional flashback, we have a new construct for dealing with it. And the construct is really, really simple, which is if I don't want to dissociate, I swear I haven't been drinking. If I don't want to dissociate, I don't wish in this completely naive sense to disassociate whatever you want, thinking vile pornography about ideology and so on. If you don't want to disassociate and you say this is a flashback, then the solution is very simply to go back to healing the emotional flashbacks. Maybe the way I've presented it is too off the cuff. Maybe it's too simple. Maybe because the course is free, people don't value it. But let me frame it this way. That free course that I've given out on SpartanLifeCoach.com that takes about an hour and a half to consume, that you get for free. You just go to SpartanLifeCoach.com, you put your email in, and it spews out a course that is video, that is a PDF, it's video and it's audio, and it takes an hour and a half to consume, and then you work that exercise every day, 5 times a day, for 2 weeks, and your emotional flashbacks decrease in intensity and they decrease in frequency. That's a pretty fucking strong result, but I made it free. And maybe that's why people are like, oh, well, that can't be of much use. No, that's the core. That's the core of everything. I mean, literally everything. When I said, I'm always going on about how great the Pete Walker book is. And I didn't say it this way, but maybe what I should have said is, it's great for me. How does that help you? It's great for you that I find that book so useful. I'm not being patronizing. What I'm saying is, it's too much for some people. Like if you're intensely in your emotional flashbacks and you're riddled with strong CPTSD symptoms and you dive into the Pete Walker book, you'll be like, oh my God, the triggeringness of Triggeringtons, because the first chapter is hard. And people have come back to me and gone, why do you always recommend that book? I couldn't even get through it. I can't get through the audio book. And I'm like, okay, what I meant was, from my point of view, from where I'm coming from, that was after years of searching and reading and attending stupid seminars and buying stupid courses and reading stupid books, I was like, this explains everything. Now, as well, I also need to be careful because it's not all Pete Walker's work. Like it's the seminal book for me, it's the core book for me, but a lot of people have been talking about CPTSD and emotional flashbacks. But what I said about Pete Walker's book, Pete Walker wrote a book called CPTSD From Surviving to Thriving, and it's a it's crucial. It's absolutely critical, because for my money, it answers 95% of all the issues that we would regard as mental health issues that people turn up to counselors and psychotherapists looking for help for. 95% of it. And the key elements are really broken down to two major issues. One is emotional flashbacks, and two is the effect of a poisonous, toxified, hijacked superego and their interrelationship. So the superego fires off, they're called introjects, which are messages from the unconscious about what a terrible, shitty person you are, but not even what a terrible, shitty person you are, not really, what a terrible object you are in the psychoanalytic language. This is the message from the primary caregivers. You're a terrible child. You're an unlovable child. You're unlovable in the core of who you are, because these messages were received in maximum neuroplasticity with the most important relationship dynamic, the most important attachment that you're ever going to have in your life, with God and Goddess, with mummy and daddy. No, that God and Goddess would be daddy and mummy. But I put mummy first, right? You caught that, right? That's a bit Freudian. It was a Freudian slit. Where you mean one thing, but you start talking about killing your mum and shagging your dad. Hey, you come here for useful advice. Oedipus complex, misrepresented as being the desire to terminate your father completely so that you can become closer to your mother and not have a competitor. Reduced by cynical people, but with great barbarity and savagery. It's Freud's idea, the Oedipus complex, to just being, oh, you wanna kill your dad and shag your mum. So I inverted it. Wow, it's a lot less funny when you explain it. Okay, anyway, moving swiftly on. Emotional flashbacks are the key. Emotional flashbacks are the core. If you come to me with an issue about codependence, with an issue about boundaries, with an issue about an abusive relationship, you name it. I mean, what is everybody, what are all the humans who are allegedly overloading the mental health institutions of the world right now? What do they go with? Primarily, they go and they say, I have anxiety or I have depression. They don't. They're riddled with emotional flashbacks, but they don't have the emotional literacy, they don't have the emotional fluency, they don't have the language to say, I'm suffering from emotional flashbacks. I'm in CPTSD here, help me out with that. That's not the language that we're using. So they'll go, if I'm kind of flighty and fighty, I think I'm gonna say it's anxiety. If I'm kind of fawny, freezy, I guess I'm gonna call that depression, because I don't have the language to say it any other way. Reduce your emotional flashbacks. Go get the free course. Okay, if you won't value it free, I'll charge $60 for it. If that's gonna make people do the course or value it, then whatever. But that free course, please back me up in the comments if it's worked for you. And I'm saying you get significant reductions. If it takes, it's annoying. You have to do it like 5 times a day. But if you do 5 times a day for 2 weeks, you can plot. Like, I was at 90% emotional flashbacks, then I dropped down to 70 inside of 2 weeks. If that worked for you, please back me up in the comments and say it does actually work. Go do the fucking course and do it 5 times a day, and do it for 14 stupid days at least, and track how you feel. Be scientific. Go, like, how often do I think I'm flashbacking right now? How intense are the flashbacks? And then after 14 days go, oh, how intense, what kind of results have I got? Have I got 0 results? Have I got good results? Track it internally, but you have to do it. You can't just listen to the course passively whilst you're doing the dishes. You've got to actually do the exercise that's given in the course. It's called a pattern interrupt. It's just a pattern interrupt, and the idea of it is to raise your conscious awareness that you have emotional flashbacks and that you are not your emotional flashbacks. This is why I say it's a critical fucking component of everything, of every mental health issue. People are coming to me and they're talking about boundaries. They're going, I don't have any boundaries. And I'm like, that's an emotional flashback issue. But why is that then? I'm like, well, for God's sake, think about it. If you go into an emotional flashback of dissociation, how would you even remember to assert a boundary? How would you even remember the boundary is there? That's a very freeze emotional flashback response to dissociate. What if you go into a fawn emotional flashback on the issue of boundaries? Your boundaries will dissolve. They'll just disappear. You'll go, I have strong boundaries right here. I'm very boundaried with everybody. I don't have any problems. But there's one relationship with one person. Ooh, it happens to be an intimate relationship. Ooh, maybe intimacy is a trigger for emotional flashbacks. And there's one area of my life when I'm speaking to this one person, my boundaries dissolve. So I'll make a resolution. I'll be like, I'm going to tell him I'm not doing this anymore because you better RTCCP, and ask for respect, and then you get into the argument with him, and then when you look in his face and you look in his eyes, boom, you go into an emotional flashback of freezing, and you dissociate, and you forget to RTCCP. You don't do it, or you fawn, and you're just like, oh, he's here, okay, give him, he looks just like my angry dad, oh shit, oh, give him everything. And then the boundaries go. It's not, for some people, the boundaries weaken and they're no longer as strong as they are. For some people, they disappear. So here's the thing with emotional flashbacks. You have different moral boundaries when you're in flashback versus when you're not. You have different boundaries for how you perceive reality when you're in flashback or not. This is why I've been saying again and again, being in intense emotional flashbacks warps your perception. But visualize it structurally. I have a structure. I have a house. It is held up with stone and steel and it is strong. And then I'm saying this stone steel structure that functions, your house, under certain conditions where you receive a trigger that causes an emotional flashback, the stone and the steel dissolves. It's gone. Where you had a front door that was strong and a wall that kept your stuff inside and bad people outside, it's gone. Your good stuff is now flowing outward. The bad people are flowing inward. The boundary is gone just because you hit an emotional flashback. When your perceptions are warped by emotional flashbacks, your personality changes. Of course it does. You become a different person. I'm an adult, I'm reasonable, I can think clearly and objectively. Boom, I go into an emotional flashback. Oh no, I'm an infant. And you could say, oh, this sounds like my ex. You know, because we've done this wonderful dynamic that's supported by our internet forums and the YouTube expertise, which is this wonderful false dichotomy where you're either at one end or the other of a spectrum. I'm Echo, he's a psychopath. So I'm all the way good and he's all the way bad. I'm an angel, he's a demon. It's horseshit, it's infantile, it doesn't help you. That's not how it works. You're both going into an emotional flashback. This one might be fighty, this one might be fawning, but if you're both triggering emotional flashbacks, you've both got what is essentially the same issue, which is your personality changes when you're in a flashback. There is then another issue, very, very rare, but that does occur, where you have a full-blown personality disorder, where that person, we're now doing the naughty end of the spectrum, the predatory end of the spectrum, is locked in. They're locked in to their infantile defense. What is this called? It would be called a malignant psychopath. It would be called a malignant narcissistic personality disorder. There is, because the trauma was so bad in their infancy, a hard shell is formed, so they're never not in flashback. So they're never not in their infantile or animalistic defense mode. Somebody asked me the other day, you know, I throw terms around, they were like, what is this infantile? What does that mean? What does it mean to infantilize somebody? It means to reduce somebody to infancy. It means we flash back. See, all your flashbacks, here's another thing, right? All your flashbacks are childish, they're infant-like. All my flashbacks, all humans' flashbacks, if it's an emotional flashback, not a PTSD flashback, if it's a CPTSD flashback, it is infantile. But some of them are induced not in childhood. Yes, that's right. But you would need to be reduced to an infantile state to be said to be experiencing emotional flashbacks. They are childlike and they are defensive. It's always a defense. So we say it's childlike and it's infantile because it reduces you back to a more primitive state. But the four Fs, they even go beyond being childlike. They're animalistic. They're actually the four Fs of biological survival for all mammals. All the other mammals, all of our brothers and sisters in the animal kingdom, they do the same thing. All mammals fight. All mammals fawn. All mammals run away, and all mammals freeze. And then you could say there are other animals as well, yes, that will do, depending on where they're up to in their evolutionary stages. You can identify animals that do two things. They freeze and they flight. They don't have a fawning ability. They don't have a fighting ability. Who does that? Who freezes and fights and nothing else? Chameleons, for example. So you'll have, it depends on the development of the animal. The more developed animals have the four Fs. Some of the less ones, they might only have one defense. Their one defense might just be to freeze. Their singular defense might always be to fight, whatever it is. So it's a reduction back. So we're moving away from the frontal lobes. And when you're panicking or you're angry or you're frozen and dissociated, the blood is no longer flowing to the frontal lobes. You've become stupider. You've become more primitive. You're not functioning as your best version of yourself anymore. You're reduced down. Here's another element of it. You can be in a constant series of cascading flashbacks, which is what I just said there about cluster B personality disorders. That is a constant, never-ending series of emotional flashbacks. It just goes on and on and on. The more stuck they are in that, the less chance there is for anybody to reach them. The less chance there is for any kind of therapy to work. The less chance there is for a spiritual revival or some kind of enlightenment moment for them to actually stick, because they haven't overcome their emotional flashbacks. Did you hear what I just claimed? What I'm claiming is the extent to which you've overcome your emotional flashbacks can even impact spiritual experiences, enlightenment experiences, psychedelic experiences, or whatever you want. Things that more neurotypical, less damaged, less traumatized, less flashbacking individuals would be like, that's a learning moment. I'm moving forward. I'm maturing. I'm growing. Doesn't work for them. Why? One reason: the intensity of the emotional flashbacks. When you are flashbacking hard and you're doing it all the time, it's very hard to maintain boundaries, either external or internal. You have no internal boundaries. So there's no internal boundary for some people who are flashbacking hard, especially we know this for the more predatory types, between me and you. You know, if I'm a malignant borderline man and you're in a relationship with me, at some point I absorb you. At some point in the relationship, usually quite early on, I go, and you become like the cell. I kind of, you're now part of me. And because you're part of me and I'm in a battle with me, I've effectively recruited you to be an emotional dustbin. You're now my, there's a lyric, there's quite a nasty song by Pink, and it's an upbeat, cheerful song. But one of the lyrics is, you're my favorite punching bag. And I think the chorus is, please don't leave me. It's one of these many borderline anthems. Like, I have a playlist in my head of borderline anthems. You've got Nine Inch Nails, you've got Linkin Park. There's we've had this discussion before. But Pink's one, it might even be called Please Don't Leave Me. But one of the lyrics is, you're my favorite punching bag. That's a very borderline approach to intimacy. So you'll be absorbed. The boundary between me and you is eroded in my head. And because you're in a joint reality with me, a group psychosis, a folie à deux, you consent to that non-consciously, but because I'm triggering emotional flashbacks in you, the boundaries where you would usually be saying, hey, listen, mate, would you fuck off? Which is what you should do if I'm being abusive to you or dismissive or critical or judgmental. Your response to that, a wonderful, healthy response is, listen, mate, would you fuck off? To be able to do that, oh, how wonderful to just be able to say no at a critical moment in a relationship and walk away and mean it without all the fucking, I'm going to make you RCCCTPP me. You just walk. You just go, that's it, done. But why do you fake that you're gonna tell your man, you're gonna lay down the law with your man, and then you don't do it? Because you're flashbacking. You're flashbacking, and your boundaries, the emotional flashback is stronger than your boundary. So let's go out on a limb here. Let's really riff with this at a philosophical, non-scientific level. We could be saying, you know, the boundary. Oh, that's wonderful. That's like higher function. That's human. It's moral. It's philosophy. I have reason. I have values. I was talking in the last video about moral philosophy. How wonderful to have moral philosophy. What's going to win between frontal lobe, human brain, and a more primitive element, you know, coming straight out the spinal column, straight out of locus, and it's going, no, screw you, the reptiles here, we can only do one of two, three things, one of two, three, four things in order to survive. Well, survival is going to beat it. Survival trumps everything. And emotional flashbacks are, I said it before, I'm going to repeat myself, defensive, childlike, to the point of being so primal that we consider them to be animalistic. We're now in an animal mode. So you go, tiger's about to eat me, he's gonna gut me, and then he's gonna pull my guts out. I'm not gonna be, in those moments when the tiger appears, I'm not gonna have the time to be a human and go, you know, I value myself and I value my life, so I'm gonna have to do something about this fucking tiger. Your body just goes, here's a fucking huge dump of adrenaline, move, or freeze. Maybe we won't see you, or do something, and it shuts critical reasoning down. It's more powerful. If you wish to progress, you must reduce your emotional flashbacks. The tendency to dissociate is an emotional flashback. The tendency to fawn is an emotional flashback. It's not like, oh, my emotional flashbacks are here, and then my 4F responses are here. No, it's the same. It's the same thing. You're triggered, you're frightened. Basically, it's always fear. It's always fear. Now, you might not experience it as fear. You might go, no, I felt sad. No, I felt angry. It's like, yeah, you did, but you're so emotionally illiterate with yourself and so cruel with yourself and so rough with yourself, you can't tell that behind the anger is sadness, and behind the sadness is a huge amount of fear for the potential overwhelming effect of everything that you feel, because you're terrified of your emotions because you've shoved them away for such a long time. So dissociation, anger management issues, the desire to run away, the desire to fawn, they're all emotional flashbacks. I did it inside of 22 minutes and 37 seconds. I will now take questions. Questions should be one sentence and end in a question mark. Go. How do you work on asserting yourself? By dealing with your emotional flashbacks. Next question. If you deal with your emotional flashbacks and reduce them, you will naturally have better boundaries. When you naturally have better boundaries, you'll assert yourself. I used to teach self-assertiveness as an external working into the internal. It works, but not great. The more elegant solution is to go internal to external. So you reduce your emotional flashbacks, your boundaries will naturally form again, as they do for any, I don't want to say normal, like neurotypical person, a person who's non-traumatized, and then asserting yourself will be unconscious and natural. How do you not react emotionally in the moment? By reducing your emotional flashbacks. What is toxic passivity? It was spoken about at length in the last video I released. Best Spartan live I've ever watched. Thank you. I'm glad I drank all this gin before I started. I'm not drunk. You're drunk. No, I've not been drinking today, but I have been gabbling a little bit. Okay, let's see. Questions? Any questions here? Emotional literacy, question mark. I don't know, that's not really a question. You just put question mark, emotional literacy, question mark. Yes. That's my answer, yes. Are you suggesting we should no longer have fight or flight responses? Says everyday therapist. I didn't use the word should. I said what might be nice is if you reduce your emotional flashbacks. What you should do. Oh shit, that has the word should in it. What you should do is reduce your emotional flashbacks. You don't want to be coming from the 4F responses. You don't want to come from there. So I've had people say to me, can you take me from a fawn to a fight response? And I'm like, yeah, I spent 7 or 8 years developing expertise in how to do exactly that. That was what my first big project was. It was called streetfightsecrets.com. It was a self-protection project. I focused mainly on the psychology. Now, I didn't know I was doing it, but I was engaging people who were highly traumatized in repetition compulsion, and I was taking them from a fawn response to a fight response. Under certain contexts, this is better, but the contexts are limited. If you're not a soldier in an active war zone, because you go, oh no, it's good if you're a bodyguard or a policeman. No, it isn't. It's good if you're doing nightclub security. No, it isn't. And even for a soldier in an active war zone, if all you're doing is going from one trauma response to another, you'll be that soldier who gets pulled up in court for slotting people after they've put their guns down, and then you shoot them in the back of the head because you're in fight response. So you're not making good, strong, adult decisions. You're coming from trauma response. I have all the sympathy in the world for guys. There's a high-profile case in America now of a special forces guy who's alleged to kill somebody after the ceasefire was called. We had the same thing in the UK. The courts come down very hard on them. I have a lot of empathy for people who've been damaged by the pressures of being in highly confrontational and combative situations. But you don't want to be coming from a trauma response. It's weak. It's a weak, unbalanced place to be coming from. So ideally, yeah, you'd want to get rid of all of these 4F responses because it's not allowing you to use your higher brain. Who in the hell got you so riled up tonight, Richard? Sensible questions, please, guys. As part of the emotional literacy course, you mentioned is to list at least 3 emotions a day. What are you supposed to do if it's the same 3 emotions? I don't know if you've done the full course, but that was explained in the course, what you should do if the same 3 emotions are coming up every day. You're also supposed to be listing the emotions behind the emotions. So I don't know whether you've got the course and you've not done all of it, but you should probably try and go through all of the course and follow all of the instructions. How do you deal with creeps? How to influence narcissists to read stop flashbacks? Yeah, don't try and do that. Don't send my videos or my material to people in your life who you've identified as emotional predators. You don't want them honing their skills, do you? It's not going to end well. That is called malignant optimism, a term coined by Sam Vaknin. You're not going to get what you want by trying to influence the behavior of other people. The only behavior you can influence is your own. And it's actually kind of unboundaried to go, oh, okay, here's a non-functioning relationship. I know I'll get them to change. That's not great. It's not good karma either. You do you. It's your life. It's your body. It's your brain. It's your energy. You do you. Your dharma is your dharma. Is overreacting related to emotional flashbacks or rather the same thing? Probably would be. Can you dream emotional flashbacks? I suspect that many of our unconscious dreams are rooted in our emotional flashbacks, absolutely. So stop with the passive aggressive Facebook memes. Got it. Yes, definitely. Like, I would always look at when the flashbacks have been reduced, we can explore the meditative and the philosophical angle. So if you felt like an impulse to post something and you were like, I really want to do this, I want to fucking post this passive aggressive meme, I would then be going, oh, I see an impulse has arisen in me and I don't reject it, nor do I judge it, but where's it coming from? What am I really trying to communicate here? And where's this going to go? Where's it going to lead to? How important is the emotional literacy course? The emotional flashback course, which is free for people with CPTSD, is like level 1. Like you're a white belt to a yellow belt unless you've completed that and you've really started tackling it because it's critical. And then I'd say like white, yellow, what is it? White, yellow, green, blue. So your green, blue belt, if this was jujitsu or karate, as you're escalating up, you've got to get into your emotional literacy. Like, if you work on reducing your emotional flashbacks, but you don't then move on from that to addressing your emotional literacy and limbering up in that area of your life, I suspect that over time, unless you keep doing the stop emotional flashbacks exercise, they're going to come back, because your emotional literacy, if you're very emotionally illiterate, you've sent an unconscious message to the system: damp down these emotions, I can't deal with them, and it's making me unsafe, so please let's just fucking feel less. We're gonna feel, but let's really reduce it down. Okay, what happens when we tamp down our emotions and become emotionally illiterate? It's a good survival mechanism for a traumatic situation that's gonna last like 3 days. Like if you're in a war zone and you just need to live, it's a good idea to become emotionally illiterate. And for some of us, our childhoods mirror war zones. They mirror the combat stress that somebody going through a war zone in adulthood would. Because when you're a kid, how are you going to distinguish between levels of threat? You're not, and you know that's just all you know is that. So becoming emotionally illiterate could be a good short-term strategy for survival, but it is a dog shit strategy for thriving and living as a full, present human being who can attach safely, detach safely, who can contribute, who can give love, who can receive love. You've got to develop the emotional literacy. If you're very emotionally illiterate, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. If you don't work on your emotional literacy, if you remain emotionally illiterate, you will become depressed. Your sex drive will go down. Your general libidinous, like lust for life, joie de vivre, is going to disappear. So you don't want that. That's not cool. You want to be emotionally literate. You want to be friends with your emotions. All of them. So there's a tendency I've seen a lot of where people are like, oh, what about the ugly ones? What about like anger or rage? I'm like, you know, it's an emotion. It's not you. It's a feeling. Like your emotional flashbacks are just emotional flashbacks. They're not you. Emotions are just feelings. They're here. They're present. They're messengers. What's the message? If I'm let's think like ugly emotions, disgust. What is that? How is that trying to protect me? What is the emotion of disgust trying to protect me from? Rage. You know, good girls shouldn't get angry. It's such an ugly emotion. Well, okay. What's going to happen if you as a good girl cut yourself off from anger? You're going to become depressed and passive, and you're going to lose your sense of humor. And that's not a good outcome. You're going to need that if you're going to survive life on the planet Earth. You need your sense of humor. Trust me, it's really useful as a tool. Very useful indeed. So your beliefs around emotions are going to have to change, and you honor all of them. They're just feelings. They're there to protect you. They're there to help you. They're part of the color palette of who you are as a human being. Yes, terror, anxiety, jealousy, rage, the worst, you know, it's not all going to be bravery and optimism every day. You know, so the like bad, negative, ugly emotions are going to come up, but listen to the wording, like what makes them bad. Now, if you act on jealousy and rage, then there's going to be bad consequences. There's going to be bad karma. But a thought is just a thought, and a feeling is just a feeling. So when we keep asserting that to ourselves like a mantra, a thought is just a thought, and a feeling is just a feeling, we build internal boundaries between feelings, thoughts, and action. And that might sound pretty fucking deep, and it kind of is, and that's straight from CBT. That's straight cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really like reconstituted Stoicism. You know, a CBT in its philosophical essence is Stoicism. It borrows from the Zen tradition as well for mindfulness, but what do we do with a thought? We go, this is my thought. Am I this thought? I want to smash my ex's head in with a hammer. Okay. Interesting. And how does the desire to do that make you feel? You know, these really corny like questions that we associate with corniness, they're actually, if they're applied skillfully by a good counselor or a good therapist, they make a lot of sense. How does it make you feel? Well, and if you can skillfully with rapport push the client to go into how it makes them feel, and they say, I feel disgusted with myself. That's a horrible thing to want to do to another human being. And now I'm angry with her again that she made me think this ugly thought, and she's got this power. Now I'm frustrated. Okay. All of this is occurring. All of this is true. All of this is happening now inside of you. But they're just thoughts, and they're just feelings, and they get their day in court, and then they leave. If you don't act on them, they don't define you. They're just thoughts, they're just feelings. Why is this happening? Where's the protection? So I always ask that. Like if a thought is recurring, I'm like, what is the unconscious trying to communicate to me that it's trying to protect me? If a feeling is recurring, what is the unconscious trying to communicate to me in terms of protection? Because everything the unconscious sends out is usually about safety or trying to make you safer, ultimately. So you frame it that way, and even if there wasn't anything there, you'll find it because you activate, you know, the RAS, the reticular activation system. You go, I've asked a question, I better find a fucking answer. How does this protect me? Maybe it's a warning to say, you can never let anything like this happen again. Okay, so how do I negotiate with the unconscious to say, you don't need to send me this kind of message anymore, homie. I've fucking heard it. I don't need messengers of rage. I don't need messengers of jealousy. I don't need messengers of despair. How am I going to negotiate with my parts internally, the conscious and the unconscious and all the different parts, all the different functions? Okay, we're safe. You don't got to tell me that. I know that. I know it was bad. And I know bad things happened, and I let them happen. And now you're saying, you're trying from the biological level, you're saying defend the territory. Now a dumb biological message to defend the territory will possibly manifest as violence. Because of emotional flashbacks. Thank you. I'm glad you were listening. Because for a second there, I thought you weren't paying attention to what I said at the beginning of this. It's all down to emotional flashbacks. Your job is to reduce your emotional flashbacks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to me today. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, as ever. You're beautiful. I love you. I've always loved you. You're my favourite. Thank you very much for your time.